So we're going to continue, Be'ez Hashem. We're going to continue with the teachings of the Holy Maggid of Mezritch. And we're going to learn a piece that is in Dibros HaMagid. Like we mentioned before, this is a manuscript that was printed very recently. And there are teachings on the Maggid, original teachings. This is a teaching that's brought down in similar contexts, in certain similar ways, in Magid Devarav, the authoritative text from the Maggid. It's brought down in Siman Chaf and Lamed Aleph. There's many places in Magid Devarav there's a similar idea, but here it's written a little bit differently. Let's read what it says. The principle is based on that everything in the world is filled with Hashem's honor, with Hashem's glory. It means there's nothing in the world, like the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, of his teacher, there's nothing in the world that's devoid of elikus, devoid of empty of divinity. In fact, the whole world is elikus, the whole world is divinity, the whole world is the oneness of Hashem. But from our perception, we see separation. And certainly the idea that there is nothing that is separate in this world. There's nothing to say, it's impossible to say that there's a place that is devoid of elikus, devoid of empty of divinity. So what is this principle? How does it play out in a person's life? So here is a situation or a phenomenon that a person is in the middle of praying. Or we'll see soon in this teaching that it doesn't necessarily have to do with the middle of praying, but anything. A person's engaged in something in life and they're trying to focus on the particular thing that they're engaged in doing, and some thought falls into their mind. Now, it's very important to understand that the thought that they're going to be engaged with, and to understand what this thought is, and this is the practice of engaging with this thought, is only if this thought falls into your mind. Like the Maggid writes, the Magid Devarav, the teaching in Ois 20, in the entry 20, is Ela imbo kenegdecha pisoim. If something comes to you pisoim, suddenly, pitom, something comes to you, a thought comes to you, something that is extraordinary and out of ordinary, which means you're not engaged in this thought process and then another thought enters your mind that's connected to that thought process, but a person is engaged in one set of thought processes or one involvement with something, and a foreign thought enters into your mind. Foreign means that you weren't engaged in this thought, not on a conscious level. You're in the middle of doing work, or you're in the middle of walking down the street, or you're in the middle of praying or davening, you're in the middle of learning, and suddenly a machshava zara, a foreign thought enters into your mind. Again, the reason why it's foreign to you, if these are thoughts that you are engaged with throughout the entire day, then it's not foreign. In fact, like the Kotzker famously quipped and said, that when a person's praying and they're thinking about business and they say, oh, this is a machshava zara, this is a foreign thought that they're having while they're in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei, middle of praying Shemona Esrei, and all of a sudden a thought comes in about a certain business deal that they have to achieve today. He says that since you were thinking about it before davening, and you'll be thinking about it after davening, after you're praying, and your mind is occupied with this type of thought, and now in the middle of that you're trying to pray, he says really, like in an ironic way, your thoughts, those are your real thoughts, and your machshava zara, your foreign thoughts, is the thoughts that you're trying to pray. So it's not like an intruding thought that comes out of nowhere. In fact, it's what you're engaged with and what your mind is occupied with. So here we're talking about something that a person is engaged with one thing, their mind is totally focused on the thing that they're trying to do, and a thought comes into their mind that they're not usually experiencing, something that's foreign to them, at least in the state where they're at in this reality. So the Maggid has a wonderful mashal, a metaphor of this. And Kiyadua, we've mentioned a few times, this idea in the teachings of the Maggid of the idea of the playfulness of the father that goes down, or the parent that goes down to play with the child. That the whole idea of the tzimtzum, the whole idea of the contraction of the infinite light, is the desire of the one to engage in dialogue with otherness in a way that creates the separation, the illusion of the separation, or the sensation of the separation, in order for the father to enjoy playing with the child in the child's sandbox, as it were. This is the chiddush. This is the novelty of this type of avoid, this type of spiritual service. This is like the tzipor hamidaberes, like the bird that speaks versus the human that speaks, and that brings great joy and relish to our Father in heaven. So the Maggid brings the same idea, similar to how this works in terms of thoughts. So here's the way the Maggid describes this experience. Kishiyesh lemelech ben b'makim prutzim b'makim etunuf. If a king, a father, the mashal is a melech, the mashal is a king, that's very much connected with the metaphors that the Baal Shem Tov continuously used. The mashal always the metaphor of a king. So there's a father, a king, and he has a prince, he has a son. And the son is involved with silliness, or foolishness, or even worse. Prutzim, tunav, things that are really savory and not unpleasant things. The son is really involved in really not holy and not ethical behavior, stuck in a very negative patterns of behavior. The father loves his child. So what does a father do? What does a parent do? The father, the king, goes to the place where that child is, because of the love for the child. The father descends to that place. Let's say the child is literally, hanging out in the wrong place in town. And the father really has a tremendous love, wants to pull the child out of this place. So the father goes himself to the place, which is completely unbecoming for the father to be in that place, and even for the son to be in that place, or the mother or the daughter, either way, that the child is in a place that is very uncomfortable and a very unpleasant place to be. But the parent, because of their love, wants to pull the child out of that place. So the parent goes to that place to take the child out of that place. Says the Magid, so there's a metaphor. This is the metaphor. The metaphor is that a parent wants to pull a child out of a place where the child is stuck in this terrible patterns of behavior. So the parent chooses to enter into that place, to go down into that place. So he says the same thing similar. Sometimes there is a thought process, or a thought is birthed in your consciousness. A thought that you weren't thinking about and you weren't occupied about. Like we said, it's pitom. It's something that comes suddenly. It's birthed into your mind. It means you're focusing, let's say, for example, you're focusing in the middle of praying. You're davening Shemona Esrei, and you're having deep intention, and it's moving forward. And you're thinking about, blow the shofar to gather us from our exiles. And you're having intention what this means, and the what this means to gather all the parts of self. And you're really involved in the tefillah, in the prayer, and all of a sudden you start thinking about, let's say, not something a terrible thing. Let's say you start thinking about some type of business, or you start thinking, let's say, even in a worst case scenario, you start thinking about some type of lustful thoughts, or some type of anxiety or fear. And this is unusual for you because usually you don't have these thoughts, and you weren't occupied with these thoughts. So where do these thoughts come from? Now, on a deep level, it's coming from a deep level of your subconscious. But where is it coming from on a conscious level? Because you're not thinking these thoughts, and all of a sudden the thought falls into your mind. Says the Baal Shem, says the Maggid, again, that what is this? This is because the higher worlds descend below. And then, because of that, a person receives this type of thought, which means there is something, to translate this a little differently, not to use exactly the words, there is something missing in your life. Let's say a person is engaged is tempted and seeks types of pleasures in this world that are unhealthy, unspiritually healthy for the person, unmentally healthy, unemotionally healthy, and they're seeking these types of pleasures in this world. And Hashem, Berov Rachmav, Hashem in its grace and mercy, the Father, our Father in heaven, wants to pull a person out of these things, and wants to show the person, to indicate the person, wants to jolt the person out of their stupor, out of their spiritual stupor, wants to present themselves to the person, like the king that's coming down, or the father that's coming down to the place where the child is at, wants to get to that place, to be in the place of the child, and to make them understand that what they're seeking, what they really need in their life, let's say, for example, a lustful feeling, or a fear feeling, for example, or a sense of anxiety, what this really means is that there is a midah, there's an attribute within their own consciousness, within their own soul, that needs to be developed. Let's say very simply, that they're lacking love. They're missing love. They don't know this. They don't know that they have to articulate more their love for Hashem and love for others and express love. And they're not aware of this. They're not consciously aware of this is what they're missing. And because of that, because they're missing love, for example, they try to find love or connectivity in things that always end up being detrimental to them, spiritually, physically, and mentally, and emotionally, at all levels of their being. So they seek out certain types of pleasures in this world that they think will give them this sense of love, a sense of connection, and they always feel empty. And they're stuck in this pattern of behavior. And Hashem wants to talk to you and help you and help you get out of that state. So what does he do? What does Hashem do, Kaviyachal? The way to unpack this metaphor is that you could be in the middle of davening, and you're this person that seeks, that needs to articulate, that needs really love. And you're middle of Shemana Esrei, and let's say you're praying correctly. And for this few moments, your mind is really engaged, and even before and after, and you're really thinking about really in a good place when you're davening, when you're praying. All of a sudden, you have a thought falls in, let's say a lustful thought. And you weren't expecting it, you weren't thinking about it. What's the intention of this thought? The intention of this thought is, says the Magid, that even though the thought shows up with a type of external tsura, form of the narrative that's connected to this sensation that's coming up, is a negative story, is a negative narrative. Let's say it's a lust for something, or an anxiety of something, or fear of something. The truth is, says the Magid, this is trying to tell you that there's something missing in your life, that you have to articulate this particular positive trait. So, even though it appears to you in this thought process, you're in the middle of praying, and all of a sudden you have a thought of fear, of a certain type of anxiety for something, that you're going to lose your home, I don't know, or a type of lust that you need to be attached to this thing or person, and it's very unbecoming, and it's a terrible thought. Says the Magid, yes, it's a terrible thought, but that's the tsura, that's the form of the thought. But Hashem is talking to you in the essence of the thought, which the tsura of the thought, the form of the thought is showing up to you because that's the place that you're at. It's like the father going down to the place of the child where the child is at. The child is still b'makim perutzim u'makim betunif. The child is in this negative place. So the only way the father can speak to the child is to speak to the child in the place where the child is. So Hashem is talking to the person in the place that you're at. Now, being in the place where you're at, which is generally your mind is occupied with these type of things, even though now you're not, because therefore now it's in a state of pitam, it's coming suddenly, so it's able to jolt you out of your stupor. When it comes to you, you have to think to yourself for one moment, why am I having this thought right now? I wasn't thinking about this before davening. I'm not going to think about this after. And all of a sudden, it's coming to me while I'm thinking about this thought. Not that I created this thought, because that's your bechira, that's your choice, and that's not Malay Cholar's Kvoide. That's not Hashem's presence there, because you're choosing to reject Hashem's presence in those thoughts that you choose in your own conscious mind to have. But here's a thought that comes to you that seems to be something that's not part of your conscious state, something that falls into you. It's almost like a Ruach HaKodesh, like the Baal Shem Tov says, like the divine spirit that's coming to you. So why is it coming to me? You have to say, now I have to strip the narrative from the sensation, as it were. I have to strip the tzura from the chaimer. I have to say there's a form of this thought which is showing up as a particular anxiety or fear or lust for a particular form, and then there's the essence of the anxiety or the essence of the fear or the essence of the attachment or the love or the lust or the sensation or the desire. There's something positive in that. I just need to understand that the moment I can separate these two things and I can let go of the narrative, of the tzura, because that's the only way Hashem is talking to me, because that's the tzura that I'm generally connected to. That's the form that I'm generally in that state of. So when it's coming into my mind, I have to realize that Hashem is trying to talk to me right now and is telling me, strip the narrative from the sensation. Just be in the place of the sensation itself, which is the sense of fear, let's say, or which can be an induction to the state of awe or a state of love, and say, what is missing in my life, and what is Hashem trying to tell me? Hashem's trying to tell me that I need to develop this attribute of love. That is the idea of Allah Samidas. Now it's a time to elevate this thought. To come from the place of its brokenness. The brokenness is, in essence, every single emotion is pure in its pure state. Every emotion is pure. It's holy. It doesn't have a narrative. There's no narrative connected to it. It's an attachment. It's a sense of love, of being connected, or a sense of recoil, a sense of gvura, a sense of tiferes, which is of a pride, a healthy pride, a good sense of pride, or a sense of being victorious, or a sense of confidence, or a sense of humility. These are positive traits. The tzura of it, the form, the way it shows up, can be something that's negative. So when I'm experiencing this emotion that comes to me in a sudden state, I have to recognize, what am I experiencing right now? And the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid is going to say, is same also with eating and drinking. It's always in this condition, which is, I have to recognize that the thing that's falling into my mind, that this thought process that's coming to my mind while I'm trying to engage in something else, whatever I'm doing, is, if it's not something that I'm occupied with, is telling me something about myself. Is a type of Ruach HaKodesh that's telling me. It's Hashem's presence is in there. Hashem is trying to talk to me, like the father is trying to engage with the child in the place where the child is at. But it's showing up to me because he's talking the language of the child, and he's talking the language that I'm at. It's showing up to me, to the person that's having this thought, in a negative way. In a negative way because there's a negative narrative connected to it. But the essence of the thought itself, the essence of the sensation itself, is positive. So strip the narrative, take it away, separate these two things, and say, okay, so there's love, and I'm missing love, and that's what I have to develop. Or there's missing a sense of yiras Hashem, a sense of awe of the Creator, a sense of reverence, a sense of the numinous, a sense of being in a state of wonderment. That's something that I'm missing. And that's what Hashem is trying to tell me, to develop this idea and to help me in a healthy way to develop this positive thing. So the positive wonderment or the positive love that has to be unfolded is couched and seen to me through a negative prism, through a negative narrative. But my objective is, if I'm a wise person, is to untangle these two and say, what is the message that I'm receiving right now? Why am I experiencing this tremendous amount of love misdirected in a broken way, in a way of shvir, in a way of brokenness that comes out as lust? Or why am I experiencing this tremendous amount of anxiety or fear that's coming out of a fear of losing a mortgage, or losing my home, or losing my job, and some type of negative fear, or a relationship where it's really not true? And then saying, so what is the core of that sensation, and why is Hashem giving me that sensation right now, and how do I direct it now that I'm experiencing it? How to direct it in a divine way, in Avodas Hashem? How do I take that and direct it into the correct way? This is a form of something that's called Allah Samidas, the elevation of thoughts. This is very unique in a very tailored way. The way the Maggid is talking about this is a very interesting way. It's the way the father tried to speak to the child in the language where the child is at. But the general idea of Allah is the elevation of thoughts, elevation of the attributes, which the Baal Shem Tov speaks about, and Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, the students of the Baal Shem Tov, particularly also into the Magid of the Maranayim and the Chernobyl, it speaks a lot about this idea. Is Allah Samidus is every single midah, every single emotion that we have is one of the 7 emotions. There's only 7 emotions that we can have, like the Baal Shem Tov says, which corresponds to the 7, obviously to the 7 spheres. So there's Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisai, Malchus, which is Chesed is kindness, expansion, openness. Gvur is restriction, recoil, or Avos Hashem, years Hashem, love and awe. Tiferes is a sense of beingness in this world. And then there's Netzach is a sense of confidence, and Hoid is a sense of humility, and Yisai is connectivity, and Malchus is receptivity. These are the emotions. So whenever I'm experiencing something, whenever something is coming to me and it's coming cloaked in a certain narrative, in a certain story, and I'm in the middle of davening, in the middle of praying, and a thought enters into my mind, I have to ask myself, why am I having this thought? How is Hashem speaking to me through this thought? Now, again, if I created the thought and I am himself engaged as these machshavas are, they're not machshavas are, they're not foreign to me, but I actually created these thoughts, then I am choosing to have these negative thoughts, and there's nothing holy about that. And on the contrary, I have to dismiss these thoughts, and I have to let them pass because I created them. That's a place not below Cholitzkoy. That's a place of bchir. That's a place of choice. In the place of choice, I could choose not to be connected to the Creator, to Hashem. But when I'm in a state of davening and these thoughts come to me suddenly in a way of peace, they come to me in a way of suddenly, I have to recognize that Hashem is trying to talk to me. My Father in heaven is trying to talk to me in the place that I am at. And these are the thoughts that I generally have, even though I'm not having them now. So therefore, it's an inconsistency to my thought process in this present moment. Now I have to ask myself, now that I'm experiencing it, what is the essence of that thought stripped away from its narrative, from its negative klippa, from its negative story, which is also connected to this week's parsha of Kiseitze, in the parsha that we learned that Vesir Sasimlish, take off the garment, the idea that the Baal Shem Tov says, strip it of its narrative. The Maggid also talks about in this Torah and Torah Chaf about Kiseitze Yishal Mulchama, the same idea of it, that has to take it off from the narrative when you enter into the battle. This idea is what I have to think about when I have these thoughts that fall into my mind. Now, granted, that the Alter Rebbe writes very clearly in Tanya that this idea, especially the way the Moranayim speaks about it, and other Talmidei Maggid, other students of the Maggid, is a dangerous path. And the way the Alter Rebbe describes it is that this is a path for tzaddikim, for the truly righteous ones. And the Derech HaBeinoni, that is Midas Kaladam, that the regular way of the intermediary one, the one that's a struggler, the one that still has the 2 nefashis, the 2 souls that speak to him constantly from different sides himself, and there's a higher self and the lower self, and they're in constant state of battle. The Alter Rebbe says, when you're having this negative thought, and this negative thought comes with a particular narrative that's connected to the thought, and you're going to start saying, okay, so why am I having this thought, and trying to get to the essence of the narrative, he says, how do you think that you can elevate this thought that's an origin and to bring it up, to elevate it into its proper state, to unbreak it, to create a tikkun, create a rectification, set a place of a shvira? How can you do that if you yourself are below the thoughts? Which means, what the Alter Rebbe is saying, is that when this thought falls into your mind, and you're really a person that struggles with these particular thoughts, even though now you're not, because it's peacetime. But generally, you're a person that struggles with these issues in life. So if you're having now this thought, and you're going to try to be engaged with the thought, you're middle of a Shemoneh Esrei, you're middle of davening, and you're having, or middle of eating or drinking, or middle of doing something in this world in a correct way, in a holy way. And now this thought enters your mind. Now you say, instead of pausing and let the thought drop, not to push it aside because that never works, but just allowing it to pass. Achiyavar, like what it says in Shulchan Aruch. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. That's the way a person should do when a person has these thoughts, to just let it wash over you. Don't get engaged with the thought, don't fight with the thought. Just let it pass. And then you until you let it go, and then you go back into davening. If you're going to be engaged with these thoughts, says the Alter Rebbe, what's going to end up happening is you're going to be so involved and start thinking about the narrative of the thoughts that it's going to be 2 hours later and you're just thinking about schmutz. You're just thinking about something that's unpleasant. Because if you're lower than the thoughts, then the thoughts control you. In other words, if these are thoughts that you normally have and you're normally engaged with, even though it comes in suddenly, if this is what the thought patterns that you usually have, if you're going to try to engage and try to strip the narrative from the sensation, which is end up doing is you're just going to be stuck in the narrative because it controls you. When you yourself are lamata, when you yourself are below the thoughts. So it's derech tzadikim. The difference between derech tzadikim, the ways of the tzadikim, and the way of the beinim. This is the same thing. The Alter Rebbe's opinion was very strong, laid out in Tanya, and the Bnei Yissaschar quotes the Alter Rebbe, follows the same path, and later tzadikim and Reb Tzadik also follow those. Not besides all, obviously, in the Siyach Chabad, that they follow this path. What the Alter Rebbe said. In Likutei Yikarim, which is one of the books of the Maggid, there's a aura from the Talmud Aaron, that the student of the Talmud Aaron, of Aaron the Rav, his son-in-law, and he writes that what Alter Rebbe writes, it really depends when the tzaddikim and beinim, you can understand this a little bit different, not just as a category, that this is a person that's a tzaddik, this is a person that's a beinoni. Of course, that's what the Alter Rebbe clearly means, but there's also a more nuanced understanding of that, is that it also depends with which issue you're dealing with. What is the thought that falls into your mind? There's something Rav Dessler talks about, lamatam b'chir sadam, lamaylam b'chir sadam, the nekudas of b'chir, the point of choice, and the things that are beyond his choice and lower than his choice. Which means, for example, let's give a very simple example. Let's say you're in the middle of davening, you're in the middle of praying, and you're generally a good person. Okay, you're a beinoni, hopefully, and you're struggling. Sometimes this side of you wins, your better side wins, or your lower side wins. And Shas Krava, the time of prayer is a time of battle, and these two voices come up constantly. Okay. But you're a generally good person. Maybe you have anxieties, fears, lusts, and things like that, which are not great, but it doesn't make you a terrible person. Certainly you don't act out on them. And then you're in the middle of davening, and all of a sudden a thought comes into your mind, a crazy thought, like, I should go ahead and kill this other person. Then you tell yourself, I never have such a thing. I don't have such thoughts. This is not my normal thoughts. I never have such thoughts. This is lamatam b'chir. This is a point that's lower than my choice. I don't have to make choices. A healthy person in this world doesn't get up in the morning and say, should I kill this person or not kill this person? That's not your bechir. That's not your choices. Of course you don't kill. Of course that's like an obvious, like anything you do in this world. This is an absolute. It's something you don't do. Am I going to slander today or not? Am I going to say lashon hara or not? Or avak lashon hara, which is that if the Gemara says every person struggles with every day. Maybe I'm going to speak a little slander of a person, maybe a little less, maybe more, but I have choice. So then think like this: if you have a machshava, thought that comes into your mind, this is we can understand the Alter Rebbe. If a person has a thought that comes into his mind, that's his usual pattern of thoughts, and the things that he normally struggles with. So, how could you elevate the thought when you're yourself? That's who you are. You're in that place of their thoughts, and the more you're going to be engaged in the narrative of thoughts, the more you're going to get pulled into those thoughts and get into a worse place. But if a thought comes to your mind that's completely out of your orbit of choice, which means it's something that you don't ever think about, and it's not a place of your choice at all, this is not something you struggle with, but you struggle with other things that are in a similar vein, because that's the place that you're at, because you're the child that's still stuck in that place. And Hashem gives you a thought in the middle of davening. You think a thought comes to your mind, which is completely uncharacteristic to the way the process of you normally think. Then even the Alter Rebbe would say, that would say that with regards to that issue, you're a tzaddik. With regards to that issue, since lamatam b'chir, there's something that you don't make choices of. What's the definition of a tzaddik? A tzaddik means it's someone that's trained himself so much that they don't have to. It's menafshikar. They do things. They do positivity and mitzvahs on their own. And a tzaddik doesn't do anything even by mistake, at least with issues with food, according to Taisus, but other issues maybe, that the tzaddik was in a place that they trained themselves in such a way that they do random acts of goodness and kindness, in the language of the Rebbe, which is the idea of doing positivity just from a place of reaction. So if you're a person that has this thing that you're not challenged with, and reactively you have positive outlook with regards to this particular thing, and then this thought comes into your mind, so with regard to this issue, you're a tzaddik, and therefore with that regards to this issue, you could think, what is Hashem trying to tell me? What does it mean that I have this type of aggression? What's this aggressive type of thing? Maybe Hashem is telling me that I have to separate this narrative from the sensation, and think, what is aggression? Maybe I'm not confident enough. Maybe I'm not pushing myself stronger. That's the sensation. Elevating that sensation to something that's holy, or even on a more subtle level, any type of thought that you have, you can think about it from a place of struggle. Or you can think about it, that you're going from a place that you're already beyond your enemy, and you are a tzaddik with regards to this issue. It's a choice that you make. You say, I'm struggling with this issue, or sapasnish. What does it mean? I don't have such thoughts, even though generally you do, but you can tell yourself and live this way and choose to live this way that I don't have such thoughts, and then you're a tzaddik, and then you can actually separate the narrative from the sensation. But this is the wonderful, powerful teaching, based, of course, founded on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which is that the world is full of Hashem's presence, or the fullness of Hashem, the fullness of this world reveals Hashem's presence, Hashem's covenant, Hashem's honor, Hashem's glory. So therefore, anything that is not part of our choice, because the human being is the only one that can create, God forbid, Chalila, the opposite of a person could do an Aveir, a person could separate themselves, at least on a conscious level. So anything that comes to a person, not because of Yibchir, again, when you're in the middle of praying and a thought comes into your mind, and the thought is an unsavory thought, it's coming packaged in a very negative way, says the Holy Maggid, that what a person should do, if these are thoughts, certainly these are thoughts that you generally do not have, like the Alter Rebbe would say, these are thoughts that you don't have, what a person should do is say, what is Hashem trying to tell me right now? What's the Malay Charetz Koyde? What is my Father in heaven descends into this place of this negative thought that's trapped in klipa, that's trapped in this very negative place, in makom prutzim umatunov. It's trapped in this negative package, but there's something that Hashem is trying to reach me. Hashem is trying to speak to me in the place that I'm at, Basher Hashem, in the place that I'm at, in that negative place, and say, get out of that place. I want to talk to you. I want to elevate you. I want you to be bigger. I want you to be higher. I want you to live deeper. And sometimes that thought in itself, that seems to be so negative in a way, is the actual thought that breaks a person out of their klipa, breaks a person out of their negative patterns, and brings a person to the awareness of Malay Charetz Koyde, and allows the person's healthy emotions, a healthy love, and healthy awe, and healthy wonderment, and healthy confidence, and healthy humility to flower and to be explored. Have a wonderful week.